Okay, welcome back to the second part of the session. I hope you can see the schedule for part two. We thought it would be nice for you to sort of hear about the programme scope and what the programme's aiming to do, and then hear about a range of different applications, methodological applications that have been funded recently. So we're very delighted that the three speakers were able to talk about their experiences today. So we have Professor Sara Shaw, Dr. Naomi Craig, and Dr. Jeremy Howitt joining us for the session this afternoon, and they're each going to talk about the pathway to submitting their proposal, maybe any reflection they have on maybe what they'd do differently or how they'd advise others in their journeys for securing funding to do research. So I'm happy then to hand over to our first speaker, Professor Sara Shaw from the University of Oxford. She's going to be talking to us about the CCC project, which is the development of guidance and publication standards to support case study-based research. So I'll stop sharing at this point.
Brilliant, thank you, Dawn. Thank you for the introduction, and great to be here in a section called Success Stories. That's always a good start, isn't it? I'm just going to attempt to share my screen with everybody and just get some slides up. Dawn, if you could give me a thumbs up if you can see it, okay, or just give me a shout out. Brilliant. Okay, lovely. A success story and slides up. Fine start.
It's actually your wrong screen that we're seeing, though. It's the
it's the one with the
presentation mode.
Okay.
Can you do a swap?
Hold on. I have to stop.
If you go to display settings, when you had it open on the presenter view screen, it says display settings at the top.
I think I can do it this way. Hold on a minute.
Okay.
It's just because I've got multiple screens. Hopefully that should be better.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, just a minor glitch. So yes, I'm Sara Shaw. I'm based at the University of Oxford in the Department of Primary Care, and I'm just going to be talking to you about the journey to getting funding for the CCC study and a little bit on where that's led us as well, and some reflections. So first of all, what is CCC? Well, the 3 C's are here. So really our focus in this work has been on complex interventions, on context, and on case study research. And as you'll all no doubt know, the MRC has a really rich history over the last 20 years of publishing guidance that can support development and evaluation of complex interventions. Context is a recurring issue in relation to that, particularly around transferability of complex interventions from one setting to another. And case study research can be really important in beginning to look at the context of complex interventions and work through some of those issues. So our particular study, this is the research questions that we have, are what are the key steps in producing case study research into the influences of context on complex interventions that advances knowledge and informs policy and practice? And then kind of sub-questions, if you like, are really how might high and low quality in such case studies be defined and assessed? And how can such case study research best be reported in order to maximise value? So that's what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. So we're looking at a really diverse literature in terms of empirical and methodological literature. So we're not only reviewing, we're using meta-narrative review, which allows us to look at the way that historically different paradigms and disciplines have unfolded and shaped case study research, ideas about context and their influence on complex interventions. And that's really a meaty piece of work at the start of the project. And as we've done the meta-narrative review, we've just literally kicked off yesterday a Delphi panel. So a Delphi survey, which is basically looking to generate consensus around guidelines and reporting standards. And we're then doing what I've put here as real world analysis, which is basically some examples of real world case studies that have either taken place or are current, looking at complex interventions using case study research and really testing out with those researchers what kind of guidance they might have found useful and the kind of reporting standards that we're looking to develop. Out at the end pops then the reporting standards and guidance, which will be early next year. So that's a bit of brief on what we are doing. How did we get here, or how did I get here? So a bit more background in terms of the journey to getting the funding for that project. This is such a condensed version, but my background is, my first degree was sociology, my master's was in medical sociology, and it's been quite a journey since then. I've always been in academic departments of primary care, which has been a wonderful base from which to do all sorts of different kinds of research, not necessarily always through the lens of primary care, always very varied. And as my career has gone on over the last now 25 years, I've also got increasingly interested in and leading research on health and social policy. So I tend to have quite a macro view of some of the empirical work that I do. And I'm really committed and increasingly committed throughout my career to interdisciplinary research. And over the last 5 years, I now co-direct a unit for interdisciplinary research in health sciences at Oxford with Trish Greenhouse. Those are the key highlights. There's some other things to perhaps point out. So at the top, some of the things that have evolved along with that have been an interest in and research on technology and innovation, but also health systems and complexity. And I've always had an interest in and a commitment to doing work on theory and methodology, using qualitative and mixed methods, and also doing case study research over the last 10 to 15 years. And those things have always been tied up with my empirical work. And I think it's really important to say that, because actually what this particular grant has done has allowed to really bring together some methodological work in ways that we weren't able to do before. So what kind of research, I guess, did I do before I got the methodological grant? I've put up here really what's funded, because actually there's lots of other stuff that I'd like to do. But the work that I've been funded to do is very much applied social science informed health research. It's typically focused on the organisation and development of healthcare, on policy and practice. And increasingly the last few years, it includes a lot of work on the role of technology in shaping health and care. Lots of different funders up here over the last few years, predominantly NIHR, and you can see the different streams of work and funding that have supported our work. We also do a lot of applied work, so we're funded a bit by NHS Scotland and NHS England and Improvement. We do have funding via UKRI for other strands of work as well, like the Economic and Social Research Council, and a wealth of other funding as well. I would add here that this gives such, it makes me sound like I always get lots of funding, and a very honest account of this is I don't know my hit rate, but I put in an awful lot of applications, just like other academic researchers, and I definitely don't get them all. So it's been hard slog, but this is where I've ended up over the last 20-25 years. I think also really important to add here that theoretical and methodological work has always been done throughout my career. That commitment's always there, it's got done, but it's often been in addition to the funding that we have got. And at times it's also been unfunded and driven by personal and professional interest. I think that's very much changed over the last 5 to 8 years, and getting this particular grant was wonderful. So why this funder and why this call? It's a very simple answer to this question. It was a very specific MRC highlight notice that came out in 2019, I think, 2018. And the programme people here will be able to comment better than me. but that came off, from my perspective, off the back of a number of years of work around developing and guiding development and evaluation guidance for complex interventions. And this was really one of the next steps in relation to that, focused on improving the quality of case study-based research into the influences of context on complex system level interventions. And rather than tell you too much about the highlight notice, I thought it might be worth talking through our collaborations and how we responded and why we responded to this particular notice. So to do that, I've just put up our entire team here. And what I'd like to focus on is Jamie here, first of all. This is Jamie Murdoch, and Jamie was, until a few days ago, based at the University of East Anglia. He's now at King's. And I've known Jamie for 10, 15 years. We have similar methodological interests, and he came to speak to us at Oxford about some work he was doing on complex interventions with quite an interesting methodology. The MRC highlight notice came out around the same time, and we had a very informal conversation, just Jamie and I, about what might be possible. That seemed really interesting, and it just really hit lots of different notes about our interests and a commitment to bringing this research to the foreground within health services and public health research. So, as I mentioned, I run an interdisciplinary unit with Trish Greenhouse. So Trish and I then connected and talking about the particular highlight notice. And Trish has a background in and indeed developed the methodology around meta-narrative review. We thought about how relevant this might be in relation to the particular highlight notice. And then we brought in another colleague of ours, Chrysanthi Papuzzi, and we all started to begin to discuss what a response to this particular highlight notice might be and what we could bring to that as a team within Oxford, but also bringing in Jamie at UEA. Now, completely separately, we've got over here Judy Green and Mark Pettigrew, who you may have heard of. Judy is a senior and wonderful medical sociologist, and Mark is a senior public health researcher at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And they were putting in a separate bid. So it's kind of a strange one, this one, about how we came to collaborate. And they did put in a separate bid. There were similarities across the kind of work that we proposed. And actually, when we were funded, the MRC then suggested that we work together. And part of the reason was that we as a team through Oxford and UEA had particular experience in relation to health systems. And Judy and Mark did and do bring really good perspectives in terms of public health research. And so we've melded those together within the team to bring up a collaboration and very much in discussion with the MRC. So those were our collaborations. We then also hired an anthropologist, Sara Paparini, who's been the postdoc researcher and is absolutely integral to the team. So there we are. I've jumped a little bit ahead in terms of bringing Judy and Mark on board, but when we were developing our own application, I thought it might be worth just teasing out what that involved. I mean, I think it just hit the mark for us. The highlight notice just seemed absolutely daft not for us not to respond in terms of our interest in complexity, meta-narrative review in terms of Trish having even developed the approach, and then also our interest in case study research and case study methodology. We did a quick check on capacity within the team, and then this is how we worked. We had a very interesting discussion up front about institutional lead, and it was Jamie who'd approached us from UEA, but given the expertise within the team at Oxford, we agreed between us that the bid should then come from Oxford and would probably be better placed and potentially more competitive for whatever reasons. And we then divided up the work amongst the core team. So Jamie led on doing a scoping review, so we got all the background sorted, and that very much informed our research questions and our search strategy then within the application for the main meta-narrative review. I was down as PI and lead writer and coordinator, and Trish and Chrysanthi were very much methodological expertise and meta-narrative review. And we very much focused on the case for support, first of all, about having a working document amongst ourselves working out exactly what MRC wanted, speaking to colleagues about it as well. And then we focused on the very specific parts of the JES form and submitted and reviewed. It's a two-stage process. So it went to review first of all, and we then had an opportunity to comment or respond to review comments that came back to us. And this is from memory, but actually I remember responding in detail. Actually, it was a tough set of responses, but arguing very strongly for meta-narrative review as being appropriate for this particular call, refining the Delphi methodology that we proposed in response to the comments, and also justifying our team makeup and the expertise that we had within it, partly in terms of my role as PI, but also partly in terms of we were an existing team in IRIS with a very strong collaboration amongst us within the team. And we talked a lot about kind of bringing in new blood and Jamie's role and how productive that could be. That clearly hit the mark. Others on this call will probably know better than I, but that clearly hit the mark. And we were funded, and it was fantastic. So what have we done since then? I've just got a couple more slides to fill you in on how that's gone. And to pick up, I know that you've been doing some discussion on dissemination and dissemination plans. So I thought to tell you a little bit about what we plan to do, and then a little bit on what's actually happened. We're quite an applied research unit, and it struck us that we needed very practical reporting standards and methodological guidance to come out of this call. And we were obviously guided by the highlight notice and discussions with the programme office. So actually what we had in were two really strong strands, I think, in terms of pathways to impact. One of those was about engaging a whole range of different stakeholders, which wasn't just about researchers who were looking at complex interventions and case study research, but it was also about journal editors, funders, decision makers, and people working at the front line who might be using evidence from complex interventions and from case study research about them. So we talked a lot about community building and building networks. And then we also proposed developing reporting standards and methodological guidance, which is what's in progress now, and publishing that in something like the BMJ, which is where a lot of the MRC guidance has come out in the past. That clearly hit the spot, and that's absolutely what we are aiming to do. In terms of what we've actually also done, some of which has been additional, is we've had quite a few other papers along the way. And I think as a team, we found it really useful up front to work on a discussion piece, which we published last year in BMC Public Health, at BMC Medicine, which was really looking at the role of case study research in relation to complex interventions. And there's a lot of discussions going on. So it was us a chance to talk about the work that we're doing, but also connect with other colleagues and feed into the wider community building that we've been commissioned to do. We've also got a couple of other reviews happening alongside the main work, which Judy and Mark are leading. So they're being published, and it gives us a chance to not only get it out there, but then to interweave that into the review work and the reporting standards work that we're doing. We've been getting out to conferences as part of our community building and dissemination. And then we have 2 or 3 other papers planned, which are the meaty things around the meta-narrative review and the guidance and reporting standards. You'll notice a picture up here, which is Green Templeton College in Oxford. So the final thing that we propose to do, which is at the end of the study, is to hold a community and networking event, partly to validate and approve, I guess, the reporting standards that we're developing, but also a means of bringing people together, hopefully in person, to generate discussion and carry on with almost sustainability of some of the work that we're doing. So one final slide. There's just some reflections on what's gone well, and just the ability to do much needed methodological work from a personal and professional perspective within our team, but also from an MRC perspective to be commissioned to do that. It's been brilliant. The support for really quite an innovative approach to review that recognises the diversity of literature that we're looking at has been great. And also, although quite a strange process initially, bringing these two teams together that had put in two separate bids has actually worked really well in terms of combining different perspectives and different areas of expertise. The community building aspect of what we've done has been brilliant. COVID has been challenging for all of us, and particularly for carrying out research in a timely way and in person. And I would say that the programme support has just been really, really positive and helpful throughout, allowing us to work with that and accommodate things where we need to. And without a shadow of a doubt, I would definitely apply it into the Strand again. It's been a really helpful and positive experience with good outputs, I hope, and I'd strongly recommend you to do the same. So I will stop there. Thank you. Stop sharing.
Thanks very much, Sara. That was really, really interesting. Already some comments here in the chat about what a good presentation this was. So please, if you've got any questions for Sara, we have got 3 minutes before the next speaker. We can take some questions in the chat. I guess the question I have is, what was the timing between the highlight notice? You know, you did actually seem to have sufficient time to really put together a bit more evidence than maybe other times when we get specific calls from the NIHR that seem to be impossibly tight. So what was the actual timing for you?
Yeah, it was actually quite tight, to be honest. And we spent quite a lot of time talking with Jamie and figuring out kind of what to do. And then actually it was just late in the day. And I think the fact that we had so much prepared in terms of the different areas of expertise around complexity, meta-narrative review, we were then able to move quite quickly. But I think those early discussions around collaboration and getting the team right were absolutely the right thing to do and have paid off in the longer term. And in many ways, once we'd had those discussions and we'd done a lot of the working out, I'm not going to say the bid wasn't hard to write, but it was pretty straightforward because we'd lined so much up. Yeah, the JES form takes a while, as you probably know. There's some, yes, there's a bureaucratic side of it, but it was fairly straightforward. I think those discussions are key.
Thanks, Sara. And yes, the JES form has been mentioned before in this chat stream today. There's a general question from Siobhan, which is, are success rates higher for applications submitted against highlight notices? Ros?
That's an interesting question. I think it depends on the highlight notice, to be honest, on how many people come in. And I think in terms of, you know, uplift for application being submitted to a highlight notice, that doesn't really happen until the very end of the process. So if your application is deemed fundable and scores really highly and is in the running for funding, then it will get a slight uplift then if it's in response to a highlight notice. But aside from that, there's not a kind of prioritization of those applications. So it's more about stimulating the responses. So I would say it's not necessarily more likely to be funded if it's in response to a highlight notice, because it is in the running against all of the other applications we receive.
Thanks, Ross. And I think we've got time for this. Well, there's some more questions. We'll just take the first one. I think it was just about the community building and building networks. So did this happen before the study started, and if prior to, was this mentioned in the application and the individual collaborators?
It's a great question. I would say informally, because of the areas of expertise that we have across the team, we'd already got quite a lot of connections across the 3 Cs, but we had never really done that community building proactively. And it's the grant that has enabled us to do that, which I guess, part of the reason for the highlight notice. So it's absolutely in the bid. Yeah. And actually it's really helpful for the methodological process in terms of then checking back on reporting standards and involving people, and for keeping some of the work actually going on. I mean, we have additional plans now beyond the project because other things have come up as part of that. So yeah, it was a little bit before anyway, definitely in the application, and has been invaluable.
Thanks very much, Sarah, and thanks to Katrina for that question. I see Sue has put another question there. We'll have to come back to your question, I think, at the end of the next talks, Sue. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Naomi, who's going to tell us about her application to improve, or her project to improve outcomes using machine learning, causal inference and operations research methods. So over to you.